This is the Sales Babble Podcast, episode 301, 2020 Goal Setting, a solo episode, with me, Pat Helmers.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers. Last summer, I was at a conference in Florida. I was sitting at a table sharing a beer with a guy who edits podcasts for a living. And I'm not that interested in editing podcasts, although I do edit the podcast here on Sales Babble. But it was really fun understanding his business and understanding the joy that he got out of it. And I was extremely intrigued by not his business, but the companies that hire him, the production companies that build podcasts for other companies. After my conversation with him, I was talking to one of my favorite clients, Hans Van Aert at Voyager Nets, and we were talking on the phone, and I was floated the idea with him, like, I wonder if I could start a production company for podcasts, because podcasting is the new blogging. And Hans said, oh, absolutely, Pat, you could totally do this. You could make... And he started pulling out numbers of like, oh, you can charge this much, and next thing you know, you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I'm like, oh. I went home that night to the Airbnb where I was staying, and I was going through the Podcast Movement catalog, and I saw that on Friday, which was the last day, there was a session where a couple people who run podcast companies were going to be talking. It was a panel. I went to it that morning, and it was terrific. It was fascinating to hear how they found their customers and what the business was like and how they were able to grow and the great things they were able to do. And I was absolutely hooked. And I met them and shook their hands and thanked them. And it really got me thinking. That afternoon, the conference was over around lunchtime. And I went back to the Airbnb, and I was staying with some other people that I had bumped into who were actually going to the conference too. We didn't know this ahead of time. We were all staying in the same house. And Mark Shepley told me that he had always wanted to start a podcast, but was never quite sure exactly how to do that. So I said, well, Mark, let's do it. And that afternoon, we actually made an episode of his podcast, Mind Your Mentor. It was so much fun. He really enjoyed going through the experience. I was able to get out of him the things that he wanted to say. It sounds great, very engaging. It was just a terrific experience. And then I went back. Then I went back home. Talked it over with my wife, and I talked over with a number of people for a few weeks, and I actually did some market research, as I always recommend here on Sales Babble, and I came to the realization, like, I think I could really make a go at this. So I picked out a name called Habanero Media. I went and found the domain Habanero Media, built the website, and started building podcasts for that, and started reaching out to people who were thinking of getting a podcast. And before you know it, I had a real business going with real customers, paying customers. And I have examples of those podcasts on that website, Habanero Media, and you're more than welcome to go look out for them. So it's so interesting that at the start of 2019, last year, when I was thinking about my 2019 goals, this wasn't even on my radar. But what's been fun about looking back at my 2019 goals, I can see how those goals brought me to Habanero Media, which is the whole point of today's episode. Because I want to talk about the power and the importance of thinking about where you want to go next year. A lot of people don't think about this stuff. The only planning they really do is what the boss asks them to do, what the company asks them to do. And I don't know if you can identify with this, but I've found in many of the people that I've met, people care too much what other people think. They care too much about what other people value, the things that other people say about them, both positive and negative, and that they let other people control them like puppet masters. And what most people don't do is take a moment to reflect and identify what are the things that they value, the goals that they have, the reasons that they wake up every morning, behaviors that they repeatedly do day after day. And does all of this all of these things that makes up your life, does it all lead to anything that truly brings you happiness and success? Most people don't take a moment to do that. But all the great teachers over time have always talked about the power of mindfulness, of being present to what's really going on in your life. And this process of setting up goals for the next year is an opportunity to do that, to reflect and identify who you are, what you want to do, and what's the process to get you from here to there. For me, in 2020, I'm going to be living a year of intention. I'm going to have my hand on the tiller, that I'm not going to let the winds of randomness blow me hither and yon, to use a sailing metaphor. And the way I'm going to do this is with a goal-setting plan. This is actually the same goal-setting plan, or very similar to the goal-setting plan that I spoke of last year, back in 2019. And so that you know what I'm talking about, if you go to the show notes at www.salesbabble.com/301, you can find a blank version of the goal-setting plan. You can also find a link to the episode that we talked about last January or December that kind of goes in bigger details. But what this plan has on it, the first thing it's got at the top is a vision statement plan. Where do you envision yourself being at the end of the year or going towards next year? And underneath that, there's 4 sections. There's the core values that you found in your life motivate you to do hard things that you'd rather not do. And then the 5 big goals that you have for the upcoming year, the reasons those goals are compelling. And then lastly, what are the daily behaviors it's going to take so that you can fulfill those goals? And if I look back on 2019, I look at some of the goals that I had. Some of them I didn't complete. One of them was to launch a new product. I actually launched 2, which is not my goal. The second one being Habanero Media. And it's important to know that I don't feel bad that I didn't do everything that was on last year's list, that actually last year's plan took me much farther than I ever expected. And that's pretty cool. So there's a couple more things that I want to talk about in the context of that. Because when it comes to core values, but when it comes to setting goals, I think it's even more important that you understand yourself, the mindfulness that I spoke of, and the core values. And there's something that I'm really seeing this year that's incredibly important, that if anybody who's really paying attention can really see this now. That I believe that people who are kind and empathetic and emotionally intelligent, these people are going to be the foundation for growing successful businesses, which may seem totally counter what we hear about in the world. When I started in sales, people told me it's a numbers game, something completely opposite. That I need to make my 20 phone calls, and that of those 20 phone calls, maybe only 4 or 5 of them people will actually answer. And of those 4 or 5, only 2 or 3 will be interested in maybe a follow-up meeting. And if I do set up a follow-up meeting with them, 1 or 2 of them is going to cancel. 1 or 2 of them are never going to get back to me. They're going to ghost me. And then maybe one out of that 20 is going to be interested in actually buying. And that what success was just like understanding that there's that 20-to-1 ratio, which is maybe different from businesses to business, and I just need to scale that sucker up. So when I looked at that and reflected on that, I saw that my professional future was nothing but a long slog of deep disappointment. And it was like gravity. It was always going to be pulling me down. It wasn't until I was in sales for about a year or so that I came to the realization that that's wrong. That that's not what great sales is about. I came to the realization that of those happy customers that I had, they were genuinely grateful for my help. They were so grateful. They were more than happy to share their success with their friends. They were more than happy to give testimonials and referrals to me. So for other people that I was talking to who didn't quite trust me, that they had somebody to listen to and talk to. I also found, too, when I had something else to sell them, they were very open to purchasing it, which revealed to me a whole different view of selling. The selling was really about helping people, searching out for people with problems, solving them, and then them telling me, thank you. I'm so grateful for you that you helped me, Pat. And then on top of that, I got paid for that. Paid for helping people. for doing things that I naturally wanted to do anyway, which is how I fell in love with sales. I'm a techie guy. I'm extremely interested in machine learning and artificial intelligence and blockchain. And it's very interesting to see how it is being used and integrated into sales and marketing. But I think as technology gets bigger and bigger and more a part of our lives, the humanity of us is going to be even more important. People who are kind, people who are generous, people who are there for others emotionally, that's what's going to matter. And I bring this up because when you do your 2020 goals, I really want you to be thinking about that. It's a case of karma. If you help others, somehow or other, it's going to work out for you. And getting back to mindfulness, there's one other thing I'd like to bring up. A habit, a key behavior that I'm going to place in my 2020 goal setting plan. And that's the habit of writing a morning diary. One of the goals I had last year was to learn more about the Stoics. The Stoics were Roman and Greek philosophers who believed in the cause and effect of the world. And they believed there's a way that the world works, but you can't really control it. But you can control how you work within it. And the way they did that is through a practice of self-improvement. They were all about using practical wisdom, I love that, temperance, justice, and courage. They were always focused on the kindness of others, and they seeked and worked hard to make the future world just. One of the Stoics that I love the most is Marcus Aurelius, and I often read a little bit about him every morning. And he was the last of the great emperors, the great kings of Rome. He was running 2 wars at the same time, trying to do the best that he could for his country, for his nation. At the same time, he was known for being extremely kind and generous to people who often said foolish and dumb things to him, would try his patience, and he had nobody to really talk about. So what he did was he actually wrote a diary where he expressed his true feelings about people and about things and about the world. He instructed at the time of his death that it be destroyed. Luckily, his servants didn't destroy it, and we have it today, and it is just amazing to read. So as I dug into this, I came to the realization of there's something to be said about taking a moment and putting pen to paper. Another one of the great Stoics, Epictetus, had a process that he used. This is the one that I fell onto. I have a book that I created, and in it I have his quote. It says, "Don't go to bed and close your sleepy eyes until you have assessed your daytime deeds. Where did I go wrong? What did I do? What's been left undone? From first to last, review the day, appreciating what you did well, yet urge yourself to do better tomorrow, and on those things that went poorly." Epictetus, from his key discourses. I'm not an evening person. I couldn't possibly do this at night. So I modified it. I do it in the morning. I wake up in the morning. First thing I do is I make a cup of coffee. I sit down, open up my book, and I ask myself the 3 questions. Number 1, what did I do well today? Number 2, how could I improve? What could I do better? And then number 3, what do I need to do if I want to be the best version of myself? These questions are not much different than what Marianne Renner talked about just last month. The first question is one of gratitude. What went well? Thank yourself for that. And I do. You were a good dad, Pat. You were a good friend. You were a good colleague. You helped that person on that startup. You gave great advice to that person. You went out of your way to do something nice. And I thank myself for that. I did something good. The second question is, what did I do bad? What did I do poorly? What were things that I did that I could have improved? And it's all kinds of things. You were short with that person. You were mean with that person. You didn't listen there. You cut that person off. You didn't eat right. You slacked off. You were lazy. These are all things that I commonly do. I call them out for what they are. And then the third thing, I give myself advice. What could I do to be a better version of myself? And I'll say, next time you're in that situation, do this. Next time you're in that situation, do that. And what I've found by doing this, and I started this in April, is that incrementally, little by little, I have become a better version of myself. I've become more patient. I've become more kind. I've become more productive. I've become more successful. I like myself better. I'm more patient with myself, which is weird, right? These seems like paradoxes. How can you become more patient with yourself and at the same time become more productive and more successful? Interesting, right? This brings mindfulness to me. This tied in with the goal-setting plan, a killer. So I want to leave you with a thought from Steve Kloida. He is the host of the Get in the Door podcast, and he passed away this year. Steve was a good friend of mine and a returning guest on Sales Babble. In his book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Get in the Door, which just came out late in 2018, Steve says this: each one of us has been given something. It really doesn't matter what you start with. You may say, life is not fair, and you're right. It's not. So now what? All that matters in life is what you are going to do with what you have been given. You have a great opportunity ahead of you, folks, in 2020. I hope you're excited like I am. Again, everything that I talked about, links to the handouts, links to the books that I referenced, links to other past episodes that talk about planning, all of those you can find in the show notes at www.salesbabble.com/301. Hey, do you know somebody who sees the value of podcasting as a way of growing their business? If so, send them my way. Habanero Media. With that said, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.